You did it. If you're listening to this episode as it airs, you either made it to summer or you're very, very close. So it is time for our annual Secondary Science Simplified end of year reflection episode. I love doing something like this every year when we get to this point in time. And I just try to take a different angle each year on this conversation. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to walk through how I recommend reflecting and discerning what needs to change, kind of 3 things to consider. And then 10 questions I want you to ask yourself and what to do with your answers to those questions. So let's dive in. This is Secondary Science Simplified, a podcast for secondary science teachers who want to engage their students and simplify their lives. I'm Rebecca Joyner from It's Not Rocket Science. As a high school science teacher turned curriculum writer, I am passionate about helping other science teachers love their jobs, serve their students, and do it all in only 40 hours a week. Are you ready to rock the time you spend in your classroom and actually have a life outside of it? You are in the right place, teacher friend. Let's get to today's episode. My take on this year's reflection episode that we're doing today was from a submission from one of you listeners. You said, when you're reflecting, how do you know when the problem is actually something you're doing wrong and need to improve on versus when it is something the students need to step up and do themselves? And I thought this was a really good question. So we're going to cover that first as we do these considerations that I want you to consider. And then we'll dive into the 10 things I want you to reflect on. So first and foremost, when you're considering your year, when you're reflecting on it, when you're trying to discern what's my problem, what's in my realm of responsibility versus what's the student's, the first thing you need to do is review goals and feedback. So any goals you had and any feedback you got this year. Let me start with goals. First, if you did not set goals, I highly recommend doing that every year. Make a note right now to do that for next school year. If you keep a paper planner or agenda, put a note at the end of July or the beginning of August to write down your goals. If you are a more digital person, create a Google Doc, which I love because then you can add to it every year and use that same doc every year. And then the key here is put a notification in your calendar to notify you August 1st, hey, make my goals and link the spreadsheet so that you make sure that you do that. I think it's really, really important. And I think it's important to make a variety of goals. SMART goals, that acronym SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I think that's great, but I don't think you need to work that hard to make it that serious. I just think you can word vomit a bunch of goals if you want. I think it is good though to have a variety of quantitative versus qualitative, objective versus subjective in terms of that measurability. Because some things you can really objectively measure and other things that the measuring of it will be more subjective. And I'm going to give you some examples. So some goals you could do could be, I want to leave school by 4 p.m. 4 days a week. Okay. That's a very quantitative goal and it's very objective in terms of how clearly we can measure if you achieve that goal. Maybe your goal is, I never want to take home work to grade. That would be more of a qualitative goal, but it is pretty objective. Did you do it or did you not do it? You could have a goal of protecting your planning period. That is more qualitative, more subjective. I know the SMART goals, people would not like that goal, but I think it's a good goal to have. And that's something maybe you want to consider for next year. You can always do class averages, EOC scores, how many passed your course, how many passed an AP exam, your test averages, that kind of thing. Those are goals that admin tend to like because, again, they're extremely specific and measurable and all of that jazz. But to me, so much of that is outside of your control that I really like to make goals about things that I can control, like leaving school by 4 days a week as best I can. There's some built-in buffer there for the days that you have a faculty meeting or whatever. Another thing I think is a great goal is picking something like improving a very specific unit that's hard to teach or that your students don't do well in. Maybe it's cells, maybe it's evolution, maybe it's stoichiometry. And you're not going to rewrite your whole curriculum this year, but you're going to get really specific on I want to improve teaching this one topic because it's always hard, or I always dread it, or there's always conflict with students about, gas laws, and I'm so sick of arguing with them about it. So I want to really invest time or energy or maybe funds into finding a solution for teaching this unit a different way. Those are really, really great examples of goals. And I want you to consider doing that next year if you didn't this year. If you did set some goals, go ahead and review those. And if you're being required to set goals in a very specific way, like a SMART goal form that your admin's making you do, okay, that's fine. Like do it to check the box. But that's why I want you to kind of do something more informally on your own. Set your own goals that matter to you and are not just to like impress your admin and make a SMART goal. Okay. But set your goals and review those goals and kind of see how you did. The second thing I want you to review and consider as you're reflecting on your year is any feedback you got. This could be from your admin at any point, but maybe like your end of year review, if you have one of those. If you don't, I recommend scheduling one of those. I think it's really important to have a sit down conversation with your admin every year. And, for you to ask feedback, for you to have opportunity to ask some questions, maybe give them some feedback and vice versa. Get feedback from your department chair. You should definitely be meeting with your department chair, I think quarterly, if not once a semester, at the minimum once a year. So get some feedback from them. Invite them to come observe you teaching and offer feedback to you. Like it's amazing. You might be scared. It does require an ounce of humility, maybe more than an ounce, a heavy dose of humility to invite someone into your classroom and open yourself up for critical feedback. But you also will, hopefully, if you have a good department chair, get a lot of encouragement too. I remember being disappointed my first few years teaching because all of our observations were unscheduled. And we were getting observed a lot in those early years. And I don't know if everyone was or if it was just me or just like the first year teachers, but I felt like there was someone in there once a week. And I would get so disappointed when they would come in and it would be a day that to me didn't feel that exciting. It felt like there was a lot of direct instruction. It wasn't, I don't know. It just wasn't a day that I was excited for them to be in there and they would show up. But it was amazing to hear the things that they really noticed about, my rapport with students, how I spoke to them, like things that to me did not seem flashy or important. I got really good positive feedback on that then encouraged me. And it made me more and more comfortable having someone in my classroom. If you're a department chair, I really encourage you to do this and to do it often and to start off your first few observations with majority positivity, maybe 1 point of critical feedback and constructive criticism and ideas, and maybe ask questions instead of just being really specific with things that they should change. I think it's helpful to ask questions like, I'm curious as to like why you made this choice or what you think about that. And or if you do have a really specific feedback, offer a solution too, not just identifying a problem. I think those are ways that department chairs can really care for their teachers. And then as the year goes on and as you kind of remove the fear of observation because you've been in there enough and you've given so much positive feedback, then maybe you can increase the amount of constructive feedback that you're giving. I might do a whole episode in the future about department chairs and like ways I think you can really support your teachers in a way that's really productive and helpful and worth your time. But y'all let me know if that's something that interests you. But I would get feedback from your department chair because I think the thing about admin is if they don't teach your subject, they're not science people. Like there's only so much feedback they're going to give that's really helpful. I think your department chair can be a better person to provide feedback or just another teacher in your department. Doesn't even have to be the chair because they're going to know science and they're going to know all that you're doing behind the scenes to make what's happening in your classroom happen. Now, I also recommend getting feedback from students. And I know that students can be vicious, so you need to take this with a grain of salt. But this was actually a requirement at one of the schools I taught in. And you just like make a Google form. They fill it out anonymously, that kind of thing. And I think you do need to go into it, though, with a very secure identity. Like your worth, your value is not in what these students say. I also think you're really conscientious about the questions that you ask and making sure you're really specific. Like if you're having them rank you on something like 1 to 5, if they do anything below a 4 and 5, like if they give you a 3, 2, 1, have there be like a pop-up that says, give me one specific thing I could change to improve in this area. Like put it on them to give you good feedback and not just like rank you ones across the board because they don't like you or whatever. But I think getting feedback from them is really helpful. And it can be, I love getting feedback of like, hey, what was a unit you felt like I taught really well? What was it about that unit? Like what was an instructional resource, a lab or an inquiry activity or something we did you felt like was really, really powerful? What was one that you felt like did more harm than good? That was confusing. Those are the types of questions I want you to consider asking more than like, how did you like me as a teacher? Was I too hard on you? That kind of thing. But get feedback from them. And do know, like, their feedback matters, but it should not determine how you feel about how you did. Like you're only doing the best you can do. At the end of the day, they have to do stuff too, and they have to step up. To acknowledge the original question asker's point about like, how do I know what's my problem versus their problem? That's where I think this feedback can be helpful. Really getting feedback from them, but like, hey, what resources did you not find helpful? Maybe you need to list some to help them remember some of those learning experiences that may be helpful. But at the end of the day, like kids can be at a deficit and they need to step up at some point. So check out episode 203. That's all about that. And if they're like, you give us too much work, okay, take an honest look at it and consider what's reasonable. And this is where I also think getting feedback from other teachers about like, hey, what are you doing? Do you think I'm giving too much work? Ask your department chair, ask your admin, like get feedback from people other than students too. We're looking at all this feedback holistically. We're not just going to look at just student feedback in isolation. That's going to help you know what you need to change versus what your students need to change. And maybe where you're doing fine and they're just needing to, get a little bit grittier. I also think it's helpful to get feedback from your partner or your spouse, your roommate, just someone who's very close to you on a daily basis. I think it's good to hear from them about a general feedback, obviously not about your teaching practice, but about your just countenance, your boundaries, your attitude. Like, how did you feel like I was burdened every day? Did you feel like I was more positive this year? Did you feel like I had healthy boundaries? Where do you feel like I could improve? Your best friend is another great person to ask to, your closest friend, just someone who's really walking alongside you in this life and can speak to you from like an outsider's perspective. And I really think it's helpful to hear from those people, like your partner, your friend, whatever, a parent maybe, who has a different job outside the education field. Because I think it's good for someone else who, especially if you have someone who really does work like a 9 to 5 and can shut their computer and leave their job, to help you maybe consider how you can have better boundaries outside of work. Because teaching is definitely a job that we take home with us, whether we take home work physically to grade or not, but we also just take home burdens like mentally that we carry for our students and for ourselves. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So I think it's really good to get feedback from those people about like, hey, what would it look like maybe to kind of let go of some of these things next year so I can have better boundaries. So that's the first thing I want you to do. We're reviewing goals and we're gathering and reviewing feedback. If you have not gotten any feedback, let's try to gather some now so you can look over that too and have other voices speaking in and not just your own voice. I think we can tend to be more critical of ourselves than others too. Your students are going to be the highest critics for sure. But again, that's why we want other people speaking into this as well. The second thing I want you to consider as you're reflecting on your year is, how do you feel about the year in light of the current season you're in? Are there things that you can look at objectively and say like, I'm not happy with how that went? Like, I'm not happy with my EOC scores. I'm not happy with how I managed my second period CP biology class. I'm not happy with how much work I brought home. But with context for your season, maybe you can see it differently. Maybe you're coaching something for the first time. Maybe you had a new prep for the first time. Maybe you had 5 preps. Maybe you're dealing with some health things that, made it so you had a lot less energy than normal. Maybe you had extra outside of your classroom burdens. Maybe you have a new baby who's keeping you up at night. Like, there are a lot of things in your current season of life that are not forever, but we need to take into consideration as we're considering our year. And maybe when you're looking back at your year, you might think, oh, I feel badly about how everything went. But when you look back at your year and remember that you had a newborn and you were getting like 6 hours cumulative of sleep and not in a row every night, you might look back at that this year and say, you know what? I did the best I could in this very unique season of life where I was generally a walking zombie. I don't know what that is for you in this season, but I do want you to consider your season. Like, if I were to look back at my first year teaching and, the energy I was able to put out as opposed to the year teaching when I was constantly having to leave class for fertility tests and I was very emotionally drained and having a really hard time personally walking through that journey, like my energy levels and my emotional availability and capacity were a lot different. And those were unique seasons. And so we want to take our season into consideration. And then the third thing I want you to consider before we start really reflecting, so we're holding all these things within context, is what mattered most to you this school year and in this season. So this is kind of more of a heart thing than the goals. Like, the goals I think are important, but again, I want your goals to be really as specific and measurable as possible. I'm not trying to use too many of the SMART goal words because I don't want you to feel like it has to be a SMART goal, but we do want your goals to be specific. But to me, what matters most is more like your core values as a teacher. Like, what do you care about most in seeing in your students? Is it their growth in critical thinking? Is it the life skills you prepared them for? Is it how well they do in your class, because your class is a really big stepping stone. Like you're teaching this AP chemistry course and it's a big stepping stone to where they're going in the future. So you really want them to do well in this course specifically. I don't know, and I can't decide that for you, but you need to know what your core values are. And if you're like, I have no idea how to decide that, I think coming up with core values is really a game changer. We have core values as a family. I have core values for myself in my business of It's Not Rocket Science, the things that I'm going to hold highly above everything else. And I had core values when I was in the classroom. So I think that's something you should consider. I have a mini virtual PD course on it. I'll link in the show notes. You can check out. It's part of my full virtual PD bundle, but really consider the overarching umbrella, what mattered most this school year as you're looking through these things. And maybe it was a year that you just needed to get through, and that's what mattered most. And that's okay, because it's going to be unique to you and your season. Now, all of those things we're taking into consideration: our season, our core values, the feedback we got, the goals we may or may not have set. Now, here are the 10 questions I want you to ask yourself. And then I'm going to leave you with a challenge as to what to do with these 10 answers, okay? So here's what I want you to ask yourself. And maybe the easiest thing to do is after I ask the question, you just pause this episode and you spend 30 seconds thinking about your answer. Maybe it looks like writing these down and writing out your answers. I don't know. But I think the simplest thing would just be to pause after I ask the question. Number 1, what went well this year? What went well this school year? Jot it down. Think about all the things that went well. Number 2, what didn't go well? Notice we start with the positive, because I think sometimes we can get so in the clouds and in the darkness, we don't see the positive. So start with what went well. Number 2, what didn't go well? Number 3, what felt draining this year from an energy standpoint? Like what were specific things that just drained you? Number 4, what felt energizing? What gave you energy this school year? What lit you up? What made you excited to come to school? What were those days? What did they look like that energized you? 5, what do you want to do more of next school year? What do you want to do more of? 6, what do you want to do? You guessed it, less of next school year. 7, if you could outsource one thing, what would it be? Maybe this is something in your home life, so you have more capacity to recharge at home so that you're more fresh when you come to school. Maybe it's something in your classroom. What is one thing you would outsource? Number 8, if you could knock out one thing to serve future you next school year, what would it be? So if you could do one thing this summer that would serve future you next school year, what would it be? Just one thing. Number 9, if you could try one new thing next school year that could make a difference, what would it be? Maybe you want to try a different way of grading. Maybe you want to try having a tech-free classroom and going back to paper and pencil. Maybe you want to try having a phone-free classroom. Maybe you want to try the whole thing I've said of like collecting one thing a week to grade, and that's it per prep. If you could try one new thing next school year that could make a difference, what would it be? And then number 10, if you could set one new boundary next school year, what would it be? Here's your take-home challenge, okay? Number 1, write a letter to back to school you on how you feel and what you want to change this upcoming school year. So look at all of your answers to those 10 questions in light of our considerations we had at the start of this episode. Write yourself a letter now while you're at your most tired, most likely, and save it somewhere for back to school you, who's going to have a lot of energy, most likely, and be ready to get back in there, to give yourself perspective and to motivate yourself to maybe do a few things differently next year. Maybe you're going to encourage yourself to try that one new thing or set that one new boundary, or to do more of this or less of this. You're going to look through your answers to those questions to write that letter. Okay, second thing I want you to do for your take-home challenge is I want you to answer all those reflection questions, and then I want you to submit all of your answers, plug it all into ChatGPT, and here's why. I think the best thing ChatGPT does is it takes a lot of information and it synthesizes it and it makes sense of it. And I think it could be really helpful to say, hey, ChatGPT, here are 10 questions that I'm using to reflect on my school year. Here are my answers to them. How do you think I should spend my summer? What boundaries do you think what do you think I should do next school year for next school year to be different? And just see what it says. I think that's an interesting thing that it can do well in terms of providing feedback. So I would encourage you to try that. And then the third thing I want to leave you with for a take-home challenge is take just one action step towards how you're going to serve future you. So I said, if you could knock out one thing this summer, that was the 8th question, what would it be? Maybe it looks like taking a professional development course to help you in a specific area. I have my Labs When Limited course that's free. I also have a bunch of paid options. I'll link those all in the show notes so you can check those out, my virtual PD courses. Maybe your change needs to be outsourcing curricula. I'll link those that you can check out as well. Maybe it's just organizing your resources, getting organized. I'll link a podcast episode for how to do that. Maybe it's getting your classroom, your physical space organized. I'll link another podcast episode for that. But I want you to try to take one action step to serve future you so that next school year, next back to school season, you have at least one thing you've kind of knocked out and moved forward in making progress on. So I hope all this helps. I mentioned a lot of links. I'll link those in the show notes at itsnotrocketscienceclassroom.com/episode 237. And I hope this was a good, helpful way for you to close out this past school year and get excited for summer and taking some time off and refreshing because you really do deserve it. All right, teacher friends, that wraps up today's episode. If you're looking for an easy way to start simplifying your life as a secondary science teacher, head to itsnotrocketscienceclassroom.com/challenge to grab your classroom reset challenge. And guess what? It's totally free. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you here next week. Until then, I'll be rooting for you, teacher friend.